Dean Curry here, Fantasy Football RSVP. So let's get right to it with Week 3 of the AAF, Alliance of American Football. Great stuff. The league's slowly coming along. Certain players are starting to stand out. I think the league is here to stay. I think it was very smart to be a feeder league for the NFL. I think that's a good way to go. I do think over time, though, you might see them become a little bit more independent. But, you don't go after the big dog NFL. You join them and be a part of them. And as you gain popularity, you could break off into a little bit more of independency. And I think that is what's going to happen. But let's get right to it with Week 3, Waiver Wire. Certain people, I always like to start with running back. If he is still available, I'd be shocked if he is. I've been talking about Jarrell Presley for weeks now. He's definitely someone that you want to have on your team. There are very few feature backs in this league. They are committee, oriented in all of these, teams are doing running back by committee. However, a few teams like Arizona, they're a good team, lots of opportunities, fantastic defense, one of the better teams. They're really featuring Jarrell Presley, and they're throwing in the ball too. So, if he's still available, which I highly doubt at this point, definitely try to trade for him if you can, but definitely play him because this guy is really good, and if you can get him in a trade, I think this guy's going to win you a championship. He's really being showcased. And there was a little bit of a change with Zach Stacy. And that's something for the Memphis Express. Not really a great team, but a team that seems to be focused on running the ball. In fact, they're probably on the lower end of the 8 teams, if not the lower end. And they're very one-dimensional with Christian Hackenberg struggling. Almost got replaced last game. But they were doing a little bit of a running by committee in Memphis too. And I would play Zach Stacy anyway because they're running the ball so much and doing little dump-off passes, including to the running back. And they just seem like they don't trust Hackenberg, and just to give him a break, he hasn't had a lot of experience out there, and he's a growing quarterback. Maybe it will turn into something, maybe not. We will see. But they don't seem to trust him enough to throw the ball, and they're doing a whole ball control offense. It almost worked last week. I was actually surprised they did so well. But something I noticed, they actually let go of a couple of running backs recently. And it looks like now they are actually going with Zach Stacy as the primetime back. And that's what I really noticed with the transition over the last 2 weeks. I didn't see it in the first week, but now they look like he's going to be the bell cow running back. So that being the case, I would really go with Zach Stacy. Another player, just to add on that fact, they're going to run the ball a lot. And they seem insistent on it. So he would be a great pickup. Jaquan Gardner is another player you may want to look at. He seems to be doing really well. And they're using him a lot and throwing him the ball. That's sort of like a sleeper pick, but now he's sort of getting out there. So I'm not sure he would even be available, but a lot of... with this, it's not like the NFL, it's a small league, and I'm going to be talking about players that are also maybe not on your waiver wire, but players you should trade for as well, and he would definitely be one of them. Not a lot of players to go around, but in these type of leagues, you have to be a little bit more competitive and change up your philosophy, which is what we do here. We think about the game, and this is definitely, if you're in a fantasy football league, you have to be active for certain players. Like, you're not going to get Garrett Gilbert, at quarterback. You're just not. He's the best quarterback right now on the best team. However, you may actually get someone like John Wolford, who Arizona Hotshots. I should probably mention the teams a little bit more because everyone's becoming more familiar with them. But he is on an Arizona team that I think is the second-ranked team, and I would put the Apollos, Orlando Apollos, first. But I really like Arizona's defense, and they seem really balanced. It's just that it just looks like Orlando Apollos are like a step above the rest of the teams. And their offense, and it isn't that their team is so much more talented per se. What I'm noticing is they just look more organized. Their offense looks more organized, and it looks like when they play teams, I watched a couple of games, it looks like the teams are just trying to catch up to what they're doing, which they will eventually. But it looks like they really did, their dirty work in the offseason. And a lot of these teams were coming together at the last minute, including the Arizona Hotshots. And, Spurrier was smart enough to bring in 12 former Florida Gators, and there's a certain team philosophy that comes with playing, and he brought in a lot of familiar players that knew each other or played together, and it was smart, of him, and same coaching philosophy, those types of things, whereas other teams were trying to just mix and match and just pick up the best players from anywhere. And they're just more organized. That and it's not to knock a Spurrier offense. I mean, I love watching the Florida Gators, and he has an incredible offense anyway. I mean, the guy's like a mastermind. The way he spreads the ball all over the field. I mean, he was revolutionary for the Florida Gators in the way that he ran offenses back then, and they just look a step above everyone else and a step ahead of everyone else. And it's a short season, 10 games, 8 regular season games, and 2. The last 2 are usually playoffs in fantasy football leagues, but I really like the Orlando Apollos. And I would probably, if you still can get your hands on Jalen Marshall and Charles Johnson, trade for them. Because this team is only going to get more comfortable as the year goes on. And a lot of other teams are still trying to figure things out. And they're not going to catch up. And when a team is really organized like this, they're basically a step ahead of everyone else. It's a lot different when you're trying to catch up to everyone else. And that organization is just going to flourish as the year goes on. And other teams, some coaches are still trying to figure out who their best players are. So they're just going to be putting up 35, 40 points a game. Get your hands on Charles Johnson. Get your hands on Jalen Marshall. Of course, I recommended them week 1, week 2, and week 3, get them in a trade. Okay? Give up as many players. I'm not, talking about an Anthony Davis trade in the NBA where you give up every one of your players for these 2 players at wide receiver, Charles Johnson and Jalen Marshall. But you pretty much are going to come close. Because these 2 players are that good, and their numbers are going to be so high. I would give up a good number of players and talented players, for them. Also, I really like John Wolford at quarterback. I think he's really coming into his own. I like Rashad Ross, the wide receiver, if he's available in a trade. And, forgive me, I'm sort of talking about trading and waiver wire at the same time because, you just got to get your hands on certain players because there's only a handful, maybe a little bit more than a handful of players that are just far above the rest, and their numbers are going to be far above the rest. And it's still early enough where you might be able to get some of these players in a trade if you can't get them on the waiver wire. So I still love McKnight, and Greg Ward Jr., San Antonio Commanders. I still like those players, especially McKay. But their offense is still kind of coming along. I do like Logan Woodside. I think he'll play better. I mean, it's a sneaky pick if you can get him with those two receivers. That might be like a little bit of a nice thing to have because they're going to play better as the year goes on. And I would certainly look at that by all means. But a player, I would probably stick with those players. Go with Arizona hotshot players. San Antonio Commanders are a decent team. Maybe I would rank them, I don't know, maybe third or fourth. I would put Arizona at number 2. Of course, we would like to Orlando's at first. A team you might want to look out for is the San Diego Fleet. Mike Martz's offense. They had to switch at quarterback. That threw them off. They had a lot of late additions to that team. That threw them off. They were not as organized, with the quarterback coming in, Nelson, who a lot of people say he had an awful week last week. It's the guy's first game. He comes in, a game and a half. It's first time starting. And, it's funny what people see. They look at the stats and say he had a really bad game. I actually, watched a good portion of that game, and I saw a lot of things that I said, this guy's going to start putting up numbers. They were just not organized. They were missing on plays. And as this team becomes more familiar and more comfortable, he's a very sneaky play, especially at tight end. You have Escobar. And I think Escobar, there's another tight end that's Denham, who's probably not available, so I'm really not going to mention him here that much. But Escobar might be available, and his numbers are going to climb. When that team starts to figure it out, game 4 or 5, the second half of the fantasy football season, let me tell you, I think his numbers are going to do really well. I think he's going to come on around game 4, game 5, game 6, and if you need a quarterback, he's a guy that, and you don't have any options, he's a guy you're going to have to watch out for because they have talent on offense. Their offensive line, running back, they have some players. They just haven't played long enough together. But I saw some things in Nelson going back there, throwing the ball. I said, this guy's going to probably figure it out, and this offense is going to probably figure it out. So it could be a sneaky play. I really like Escobar. Of course, Nick Folk, Arizona, would be a good kicker to pick only because they have a very good defense and they get lots of opportunities on offense, and they have a real good ability to move the ball. Very balanced team, good coaching. Probably the second best organized team next to Orlando, which is just worlds apart. But they move the ball, but they kind of have a problem getting it in the end zone. So definitely play Nick Folk as kicker. Those are the players I really like. I really feel are doing really well. Anthony Denham, if he's available, definitely pick him up. Salt Lake Stallions, but those are the players you really want to look at. And it's one of these things where if you get like one of these players, like I mentioned, don't worry about trading all these other players. Sometimes you could pick like a player like a Denard Robinson who hasn't really broke out yet, but people recognize the name. You could couple, and his numbers will probably climb. You could probably include him on a trade. And when you make trades, try to use players that kind of have some NFL experience, because one of the things that I notice is that people are more open for trades for people that haven't broke out yet, like a Denard Robinson, because they recognize the name. I do like the Birmingham Iron. I would probably put them at 4, maybe the Fleet at 5, as far as ranking. And they also, have they're not bad. Memphis has a long way to go. So we're going to keep this at that. These are the players I have for week 3. I'll be back for week 4 next week. But this is sort of a learning thing because these coaches are actually experimenting a lot more than I thought they would as far as being organized. Not Orlando, but the other teams are trying to figure out which players to play. So, you know, it's going to change rapidly each week. Things I say might even contradict the following week just because we saw a change in what's going on with coaching philosophy. And everyone knows I'm real big on coaching philosophy and looking at trends. So, until next week, I want to thank you for tuning in. I'm Dean Curry, and this is Fantasy Football RSVP. Please subscribe, and we'll have more and more information coming. And so, have yourself a wonderful day.